Hello, and thank you to everyone for joining us for our webinar, Software Enriches the Brand. We would like to welcome you and our guest speaker, Charles Green, author of the recent Forrester Wave, Software Product Development Services. Joining him will be Alex Lyshak, Head of Operations for EPAM System. We will start through the agenda. Alex. Today's agenda will cover as Software Enriches the Brand, companies looking for help. What does Software Enriches the Brand partners look like? Charles will also share results from the Forrester Wave, and Alex Lyshak will take us through a recent case study with Canadian Tire. We welcome your questions and ask that you use the question panel at the right of your screen, and Alex and Charles will address these at the tail end of our session. So we would like to kick it off and welcome Charles Green, presenter of the first section.
Thank you, Mariette. And it's certainly my pleasure to be here today, and thank you all on the line for taking time out of your day to join the webinar today. As a means of introduction, as Mariette mentioned, I'm an analyst at Forrester, and my research over the past few years has examined the product development services market and some of the key dynamics which we see playing out in this kind of really emerging segment of the technology services market. So what I want to do in the first 10 to 15 minutes of the presentation is really to outline to you the context of this perfect storm of technology change and how it's going to change how businesses operate, particularly in what we're calling the software-enriches-the-brand world. And it's with this I want to share with you what I think are some pretty shocking numbers. If I can get the slide to move. But really that the, highlight that these numbers are going to really highlight the changing nature of the physical assets and products in the vast majority of industries. So having this home, I'm going to talk about how the physical is dying, that there's this shift from the physical to the digital. And it's really this idea, you can think of it almost like there's a Berlin Wall which is falling down between the physical and the digital. And just as in 1989 when the wall came down and the collapse happened almost overnight and caught many people off guard, so this transformation is also happening at lightning speed, and organizations are scrambling to update their business models. Firstly, if you look at Christmas last year, foot traffic decreased nearly 15% compared to the same 2 months of the year previously. But overall, retail sales were up 4 to 5%, so there's a clear shift from the physical to the digital channels. 10,000 retail shops have closed in the UK alone since 2010. Now, clearly, some of this is due to the economic downturn, but it's also clear that there is a digital shift taking place. When we talk to companies, when we talk to retail companies at Forrester, it's clear that there has been simultaneously a significant rise, for example, in the shift to mobile traffic. 7,500 UK bank branches have closed, and another 5,000 are predicted to close in the next 5 years. In the US, this will be also about 5,000 as well. Now, you think about it, when you deposit your check, if you can do that via your mobile application, why do I need to go to my bank? Speaking just personally, I haven't even stepped foot in a bank branch for the last 5 years. So it's clear that there's some behavior which is shifting to some of these digital channels. 450 newspapers have closed in the US alone. 55% decline in the number of travel agents since 2000, and that represents approximately 70,000 jobs. And this also extends to the product categories as well. You see that digital camera shipments have dropped 42% in the last 2 years. So what this really implies is that customers are changing their behavior faster than businesses can change their business models, faster than they can change their processes, and faster than they can change their technology. And to support these assertions, I'm sharing here some key data points really drawn across a variety of surveys conducted by Forrester. You see that at the top, 68% of business leaders in North America and Europe state that addressing the rising customer expectations is a top business priority. Our latest survey results back when we updated this survey, we're still going through most of the results, but they show that this is now actually the #1 priority for organizations tied along with growing the business. So really this idea of addressing these rising customer expectations being a critical priority. And that leads into then that 85% of senior IT buyers state that meeting these rising customer expectations will be the primary driver of services spending in 2014. In the past, every year it's always about lowering costs. So now we see it's about meeting these rising expectations. So again, you see here this fundamental shift playing out. And then reflected by 42% of executives stating that they need new and improved IT systems to innovate, that these old systems are simply not fit for task in this new software-enriches-the-brand world. And 39% state that leaders, they need to integrate with other products and services to provide a better value proposition. So it's about building up that ecosystem and recognizing that to create great customer experiences, standalone products are no longer enough. For example, the average television set now has over 20 applications pre-installed upon it. It's about that broader ecosystem. And then finally, 30% of mobile leaders admit that they cannot adapt their business processes quickly enough to take advantage of mobile technology. So it is clear that something is going on. And it's clear that the companies need to drive a new business agenda around customer engagement. And to achieve that level of customer engagement, software becomes absolutely critical. It's now a strategic asset, not an operational nice-to-have. It's become that strategic asset because it's the software which sits at the intersection between companies and their customers. And to give you a sense of what I mean here, I want to talk about what we're calling the software-enriches-the-brand. Again, as I mentioned, it's really the software which is at the intersection between companies and their customers. You talk, for example, about mobility. There are heightened expectations around mobile. The mobile app is always on, it's easily accessible, so it increases my expectations as a customer. And a great example of this is USAA, which introduced their mobile banking app about 4 years ago now, which enabled you to take a picture of your check and then deposit it. And they had 120 million mobile deposits within 18 months of introduction, which is great news, except when you consider that they had only planned for 20 million within 3 years. So it was 6 times what they had planned for. Looking then at pervasive analytics and big data, how to improve business decision-making and create great experiences via analytics and via the huge amount of data which is now becoming available. Another example here, look at what Home Depot did with their acquisition of Black Locust. That they couldn't hire these people with the data skills quickly enough, so they actually had to go out and acquire somebody. So Home Depot is really hoping to create an online environment where the prices change by the second and are determined by algorithms, not by merchants. And as one of the vice presidents of Home Depot stated at the time of the acquisition, gone are the days where we're building 50 to 200 stores a year. We're shifting that capital to technology that can help us advance our business at a much faster pace. Again, looking at then at the digitization of processes, that there's this information captured digitally at the point of interaction with the customer, which again can then enhance the customer experience. Again, if you look at the home automation space, Train, which used to sell through a network of 10,000 distributors, what they did was to provide these distributors with a tablet-based configuration tool, which dramatically shortened the sales cycle and drove a 30% increase in the order size, because the resellers could easily compare and contrast the different systems. And then finally, looking at the smart products and machine-to-machine. More and more products are becoming smarter, they're becoming connected, and in combination with that, the role of software and the analytics behind that also becomes more and more important. Again, a good example here is Maersk. They smart-enabled 9 million containers, and to be able to do that, they could provide data to their customers on the position and the status of these containers, so that they can then charge a premium because they can provide these status updates, which is particularly important for some of their, for example, for some of their refrigerated containers. So what this really means is that these digitally enriched brands are creating a whole new set of business requirements. And again, I want to just look at that in a bit more detail as well. Looking then, as these digitally enriched brands have these new business requirements, these new data-centric business models which are emerging, both in the sense of using data and advanced analytics to generate new experiences for customers, but also there are, what we're seeing is emerging opportunities to then sell that data on the usage of these products. And in many cases, that data on the usage of the product can often be almost as valuable or more valuable than the product itself. Secondly, that the speed of customer feedback and the ability of customers to respond immediately, either positively or negatively, will have an immediate impact on your brand in this digital world. So it requires companies to develop an architecture which enables them to respond quickly and agilely. Thirdly, that the product architectures need to evolve for continuous updates. The days of simply throwing a product over the wall and forgetting about it are over. For example, look at how Samsung leverages the Microsoft Azure cloud platform to help manage and deliver software updates to their smart TVs and other consumer electronic devices. And there are also clearly there some important implications for security and identity management as well. Fourthly, that there is move towards more atomized business processes. And to put that another way, we're talking about the fragmentation of business processes. So if you think, for example, about the activities which customers are likely to take in their moment of need, that you need to consider these aspects in order to generate and create these customer experiences. So an example, for example, when you check into a hotel and you stand in the lobby, and you need to break down these activities to understand what is the most likely next action of that customer. And in that case, if they're standing in your lobby of the hotel, then it's most likely that they're looking to check in to your hotel, and you need to be able to provide those kind of services on the mobile app at that particular time. And finally, more and more companies are acquiring software companies to raise their digital IQ. Just witness the range of non-technology companies acquiring technology startups. If you look, for example, at the clothing retailer Under Armour, they acquired MapMyFitness, which is a fitness tracking application developer company. Ford bought the music app startup Livio. And it's not just acquisitions. Walmart, for example, they set up their labs group in Silicon Valley and have sought to generate a startup spirit, organizing hackathons, for example. Organizations as diverse as McKesson and Wolters Kluwer have set up their own internal software operations separate from IT. And the reason they're doing that is because they recognize that these software products, which are going to lead them to becoming digital enterprises, are a whole different breed with a whole different skill set and mindset from traditional IT projects. And what this means then is that companies are operating more and more as a software company. It's this concept of every company becoming an ISV. But when they do this, things start to change. In this Software-Enriches-The-Brand, then, IT is being asked to deliver continual uptime, 5 nines availability and reliability. And they're being asked to deliver 5 to 50 releases per year, fundamentally different from, say, the 3 releases per decade from a few years ago. And also that they're being asked to generate that level of ease of use for constituents, whether that's your customers, your partners, or your employees, who can figure out that mobile app in a matter of minutes. So what we see here then is that user experience becomes an absolute requirement, not a nice to have in these next generation of technology engagements. We also see that there's a tsunami of releases. This, 5 to 50 releases per year, as I mentioned, simply requires agile processes and a new application architecture. And we see this agile being implemented not just in IT, but also in marketing as well. Thirdly, that is a need to refactor the back-end applications and architectures to make them much more atomized and granular to support these front-end applications, as I mentioned, these much more granular type engagements. And fourthly and finally, that it's necessary, as I mentioned, to create a separate software engineering group to really change that operational mindset. As I mentioned earlier, that's why we see so many diverse organizations setting up groups separate to IT. So to recap then, I've presented a lot of information there, but so to recap, this software enriches the brand world where customers interact with companies via the software. It's going to drive a wholesale digital transformation in companies. The complexity of mobile is increasing across multiple vectors. And that it's now really that the software and the user experience is what is driving the customer's brand experience and their product and service differentiation. Also that the role and the value of the technology stack is changing in this software enriches the brand world. And that in turn is going to see that the makeup and skills of IT are going to evolve and change very dramatically. Now, for many organizations, as we've seen, some organizations are going to be setting up software operations groups separate. Other companies may be making acquisitions. But what we also see is that many companies, when they're being asked about trying to improve their products and services, what are they doing to achieve that? Now, this is some survey data. This is cut by respondents who stated that improving their products and services was a critical priority. And you see that at the top, no surprise, that creating new product development is the #1 priority, with 70% stating that is what they're focused on. But then if you look at the second highest ranking, it's 42% with the increased willingness to partner with other firms. This is shift to more open innovation models, this greater willingness to work with outside partners to generate this next next generation of these new products, which are really differentiating in the software enriches the brand world. And it's then with this, then I want to hand back over to Alex to explain to what do these partners look like in the software enriches the brand era.
Thank you, Charles. I'd like to spend next 10 minutes talking about service provider perspective and add a little bit of color to what Charles has covered, but coming from the perspective of EPAM as a company. And I'd like to start by asking a question about industries. Some industries are affected more by these changes more than others. Does this change apply only to B2C, or does it apply also to B2B? Are these changes relevant for companies that are traditionally technology-dependent businesses, or is this a broader trend? Forrester earlier this year conducted a study in which they surveyed more than 1,000 decision makers in companies with 250 or more employees, asking them questions about digital business. And one particular question focused on asking executives if they thought their industry is likely to be disrupted in the next 12 months. You can see the answer to this question on this slide, and it paints an interesting picture. Not only you see that majority of the industries think that their business will be disrupted, but also this list includes both B2B and B2C companies. For example, at the very bottom of this list you see industrial products, which is an industry that is traditionally perceived as B2B, but in that industry only 67% of executives identify themselves as B2B, with fully a third of them saying that their industry is both B2B and B2C. So they're also thinking about customer expectations. So what are some of the reasons behind this picture? First is industries are becoming more competitive. So with the advent of price transparency, price comparison services, buyers and consumers are becoming more powerful, and so there increased margin pressure on businesses. Second is segments within industries are eroding. So with the lowered cost of technology, increased speed of innovation, differences between what used to be premium face-to-face services and what used to be perceived as low-cost technology-only services is eroding. This is, for example, very relevant for insurance industry. So the competition between companies that used to operate in different tiers is now more intense. Second is new entry. We see retail companies competing with media, Amazon starting a regional programming business, travel companies starting to offer insurance products, telco companies going into banking and payment systems. So we have competitors coming from unexpected places. This increased entry is enabled not by just the fact that customer expectations blur the lines between products and customers often cannot tell what industry the company is in, but also the fact that new entrants are no longer required to attack the whole value chain of the incumbent players. So these atomized plug-and-play business processes that Charles mentioned, with them many of the building blocks of the value chain are available on the cloud. So payment, content distribution, and other services allow new entrants to create a smaller, more focused entry into new markets. So in a way, technology is changing its focus, and over time, technology has made what's minimum viable company in the industry, made that size go down. So now individuals or very small groups of people can enter and compete. So let's talk about the role of technology and how has that changed. When we look at the main areas of technology in infrastructure, software, data, user experience, we all have this innate understanding that these things have the fraction of mind share has changed over time for these things over the last 20 years. Infrastructure used to be a big problem in the 90s where hardware and limitation of the metal boxes that we had in data centers were a key concern for creating new products, for ability to scale. And then first with virtualization and then with cloud and programmable infrastructure, we slowly but surely overcame that problem. So even myself, 15 years ago, I was working with a big software company that was attacking telco industry, prototyping what was the first version of what they called soft switch, software-based implementation of network switching technology. They were trying to compete with hardware vendors. Today, we see that vision fully implemented. Software-defined networks is a new paradigm where the part of the network that actually forwards the traffic is completely separated from the control of the network, which is fully realized through software. And same things happen to computing, storage, and virtually every other area of the infrastructure. So today infrastructure occupies not nearly as much mind share as it did before. The role of software has also changed. The building blocks that were required to put together a web application 10 years ago were the number of them and the complexity was so high that it was extremely difficult for one person to master. Then we had later on LAMP stack, Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP, which was the first vision for fully integrated, relatively easy to master stack for developers to be able to create online applications. And today, when you go and look at the job advertisement as startups, most of them are hiring full stack developers. We have a SMAC stack, social mobile analytics cloud, as the new stack, and we have one person that can fully master software stack and then further lower what is required to create a new product. And then Agile now became a hygiene factor. It doesn't really motivate anyone else anymore. This is considered to be something that is a given. And so that helps businesses connect with engineering, reduces the release cycles, and makes companies able to push products into the marketplace faster. Data also used to be a dark art. There were no tools. There was no ability to experiment at scale with data or derive insights. With the advent of Hadoop, cloud, and other technologies, this bottleneck is gradually disappearing, although it still is there, and allows companies to derive insight from data. And then finally, customer experience became not an afterthought, but it now really became a benchmark. And I have a slide from another survey that was done. This is from Forrester's Customer Experience Index, which is an initiative by Forrester to assess how customers perceive the experience that companies are creating across all of the channels. And what you will see is that Customer Experience Index leaders outperform the market, while companies that do not have a high Customer Experience Index lag behind. And this is not kind of a nuanced change. If you look at 2013 alone, then the companies that were able to bridge the gap in customer experience outperformed their peers by 20% in 2013 alone. So what does this mean? So how do we think about customer experience, and what does it mean for execution, how you think about it? Let's look at the travel industry. And when we think about the journey that the traveler goes through, from dreaming about travel, looking at destination, speaking to their friends and family, to planning the trip, checking the prices, looking at the availability, planning the time, finally shopping for the trip, managing the reservation, preparing for the trip, actually traveling, and then telling everyone else about how it went, and then thinking about post-trip services. There is an old mindset where we have point solutions from content management to scheduling systems for airlines, flight reservation systems, or baggage handling systems, which address specific elements of this customer journey. Or we can have another mindset where we think about the customer journey as a whole, and instead of coming up with point solutions that resolve specific parts of the journey, we actually think about the customer experience overall and how that helps us create a better customer experience. So this new product-centric mindset that addresses customer journey as a whole also requires product-centric execution. This is not an evolutionary change. When we think about the product lifecycle, from all the way from strategy to customer development to architecting and prototyping the product to actually putting it into production, supporting and deploying, in the software world, there is a marked difference between how things were done before and how things are still done in some companies and how things are done in the software-enriches-the-brand world with the companies that are leaders in the customer experience. Whereas before, the approach was reactive, kind of preserving what works, making sure that things are up and running. Today, it's proactive, continuous improvement and experimentation. Instead of first creating the idea, then developing, then testing, then analyzing it, first we start with analyzing the data, testing it, and then we put it in development. Whereas before, user experience was kind of build it and they'll come, we'll create it in the lab. Now it's very iterative in context where consultants come and assess how users interact with the product, where they are at work, while traveling, at home. Prototyping also changed differently, where before we had functional products almost fully implemented to even try them out. Now minimum viable product is how customers are thinking about creating new offerings. Architecting not custom or package-based solutions, but creating them from internal assets, software as a service elements, and developing it not in the waterfall way, requirements, development, testing, but in agile, very quickly iterating. And then of course, the nuts and bolts of development changed a lot. Whereas testing was done after, now testing is continuous and automated. Continuous delivery is now the benchmark for how the software is put into production. Facebook puts their software into production 2 times a day. Etsy, online marketplace, does it 20 times a day. And then Amazon famously said that even a year ago they were putting new products to the customers every 11 seconds. So the approach has changed dramatically, whereas before it was focused on resolving the limitations of technology. Today it is focused on meeting customer expectations. So there is a great reversal of approach and how things are done. And that has dramatic impact on the company. So 5 years ago, articles were hard to believe that Motorola is now a software company. Everyone was thinking that they're doing the hardware. They were the first platform for apps, although obviously not as successful as Apple later on. GE, with the advent of Internet of Things and machine-to-machine, has declared that some of their divisions are now software companies. Ford, with the connected car, said that they're now a software company. Nike famously 2 weeks ago commented around the fuel band product and said that they're going to focus on software. So truly now every company has at least an element of a software company, and they need to operate this way. And this also means that everyone, product managers, sales and advertising people, they all now work for software companies. And this requires new hybrid skills, from strategy, vertical skills, experience with specific industries, ability to re-engineer the business processes behind them and manage organizations through change, to design skills about user experience, formulating minimum viable product, prototyping it, to engineering, and not just with the legacy skills, but also with some of the emerging technology, ability to create the product from scratch, 0 to 1 development, ability to re-architect and connect the legacy software, ability to roll it out, adapt it for the markets, language-wise or personalization-wise, ability to develop it, to deploy products not to just one platform, but for any platform that exists, and ability to support B2B clients in customization of the product for them. And of course, performance engineering and managed services at the end to complete the cycle. All of these need to rely on a core set of skills: agility that Charles mentioned, the ability to deal with the relentless flow of product to the customers, ability to manage portfolio of projects, and process discipline behind this. And underlying all of this, training, infrastructure, and assets, solution accelerators to cut time to market, infrastructure to be able to to reduce the need for investment from the companies, and the training of these new hybrid skills. And ironically, not only these skills need to be combined, but these are the same skills that companies have the hardest time hiring. So if you look from the recent survey, what roles are the most difficult to hire for, these are all the same roles that we were just talking about: user experience design, data scientists and data analysis, enterprise architecture, application development, and business analysis. So this makes situation even more complicated, because every industry, as we talked about, is affected by this digital transformation. It's not just B2B or B2C. Companies that are able to treat all of the facets of this digital transformation holistically, they outperform their competitors. But the very nature of skills and capabilities that is required to achieve this digital transformation makes it very complex. So with this, I'll pass it on back to Charles, who will talk about the Forrester Wave research.
Thank you, Alex. And it's really clear to see that in this software-enriches-the-brand world, there are a new set of requirements needed by companies. As Alex mentioned there, in many cases there are challenges finding the appropriate skills. And so really it was last year that we decided to launch what's called a Forrester Wave evaluation of the service providers who are able to offer software product development services. Now, for those of you on the line who are not familiar with what we call a wave, this is really a quantitative assessment of the leading providers in a specific market. In this case, it's always about developing software products. Who are the partners that can help you develop such products? Now, it's important to note that there was a strict criteria to participate, particularly given that the average deal size in product development is substantially smaller than in many IT engagements. There are a large number of potential providers in the market, but this was a global evaluation focused only on the providers with significant scale, and that's reflected by the need of the provider to have at least $100 million in software product development services revenues. In addition, they needed to have a deep concentration in this space, and that's reflected by the need to have more than 25% of product development services revenues coming from software product development. And just to explain that very briefly, for us, we see product development from the spectrum from manufacturing, mechanical type work, mechanical engineering type work, through to embedded, which is embedded software, where it's developing much more, for lack of a better word, at the chip level, and then finally at the software product development. So this wave evaluation was really just focused on software product development. Thirdly, that the provider, it needs to be a strategic service line for the company. And finally, there needs to be a sufficient level of interest from Forrester clients in the particular provider. Now, I should note that Forrester Wave is a very rigorous but also very transparent evaluation process. This was a 6-month process altogether. It involved starting back in August 2013 with an invitation to the providers to participate. We shared the criteria in which we would be evaluating the provider with them. We asked them, providers, to give us feedback were the particular criteria which we were missing, for example. And then, based on the finalized questionnaire, this was sent out to the providers, it was a very detailed questionnaire. We also conducted customer reference interviews to get the customer perspective. We did executive strategy briefings to understand what is the go-to-market strategy of the providers, where are they making the key investments, where have they made the key investments in the past 12, 18 months. And then based on that, we conducted an analysis of all the data we collected. This was also then sent out to fact checks to the providers to make sure everything was factually accurate. And then the final scorecard review in January 2013. And then finally, the report published in March 2013. And to give you a sense of some of how we really evaluated the providers, I've shared here the evaluation criteria. And you can see here it's really split between the current offering, the strategy, and the market presence. And you'll note there that there's a weighting for each of the criteria. You'll note there that the current offering has a weighting of 50%, and the strategy also has a weighting of 50%, and market presence being 0% weighted. And that's because We don't consider that the size of providers does not have a bearing on where the provider ends up in the final graphic, but as you will see in a later slide when I show you that final graphic, it does impact the size of the presence, the size of the provider's bubble on that particular graphic. Now, I don't want to bore you by going through all of these criteria, but I do want to highlight that these criteria were developed and tied closely to the criteria which we see being required in the software-enriches-the-brand world. So just calling out some of these, for example, the customer satisfaction. This came directly from the customer reference calls we did, about how satisfied were the customers with the provider. Looking also at scope and sophistication. Is the provider, for example, able to provide end-to-end services for product development? Can they take that end-to-end responsibility for the product? Thirdly, permanent onshore presence. Not just because of concerns over travel or visa issues that we include that particular criteria, but it's rather because the complexity of these next generation of projects simply requires many cases to have a greater onshore presence. The speed, the need for agile development, for example, requires a level of onshore presence. Looking then also leads into then the agile and advanced delivery capabilities. What level of agile expertise did the provider have? How many resources does the provider have trained in agile? What about some of the tools and frameworks that the provider has to enable their clients to use agile development? And also, as we've spoken a few times already in the presentation, user experience design capabilities. So what capabilities does the provider have in this particular regard? Do they have a broad range of user experience design capabilities? Do they have, for example, at least 100 experts in user experience? And then finally, also the vertical focus, that industry knowledge, value-added services that refers to the consulting services, which we see becoming more and more important. Innovation, is the provider able to bring new ideas to the engagement? Looking at the strategy, for example, the management vision and execution, the core next generation technology investments, as going back to what we spoke about earlier, the perfect storm of technology change simply requires companies to be investing in these next generation of technology, given the speed of change and what is happening at the moment. Moving on then, looking then at how do the vendors stack up based on this set of criteria in which we evaluated them. So this is the overall wave graphic, and you'll see there, just to explain this, you'll see that on the left-hand side, on the vertical axis, you see that that's the current offering. That's the evaluation from weak to strong. And then on the horizontal axis, that's evaluating the provider's strategy, again, from weak to strong. And again, you'll see there, looking at the market presence, as I mentioned earlier, that does not have an impact on where the provider ends up being positioned in the graphic, but you'll see there that there is the size of the provider's bubble does vary depending on their market presence. But again, it's worth noting that market presence does not just refer to the overall revenues of the provider, but also through their growth rate, and also to what extent are they growing their large accounts? To what extent are they growing their 1 million plus, their 5 million plus accounts? And you'll see in the final evaluation there that EPAM Systems and HCL were the two providers in the leader category. And really, in the leader category, really based on what we've spoken about so far in the presentation, that there are some of these rapid changes in the technology and business environments, mean that organizations really do have different expectations of suppliers than they did in the past. And both to make it into that leader category, it was really necessary to have a depth and clarity of vision. It was necessary to be able to have that vision backed up by specific investments, and that really helped them to be set apart from the other providers in the evaluation. You'll see there in the strong performer category, you'll see some of the large Indian-centric providers such as Infosys, TCS, Wipro, which again have a strong reputation in the more IT services engagements, but they also have significant scale there. You see there some of the larger bubbles being mentioned there on the graphic. So they do have a significant scale in software product development services as well. In addition, looking at some of the other providers who participated, you've got there 4 of the pure play providers, pure play product development providers. That's Global Logic, Nest Technologies, Persistent Systems, and Symphony Teleca. And each of these providers having at one time or another been labeled as leading this particular market, but in the past few years, each has really struggled in some cases, with their own particular issues, whether that be management issues, management changes, to shifting strategic directions. In addition, you'll see there Pactera also participated. Pactera has significant scale in testing and localization work for the Chinese and Asia-Pacific markets, and they also articulated a strong vision during this evaluation. And then finally, the last provider, which I haven't mentioned yet, which is Mindtree. Again, Mindtree also articulated a good vision of the shift to this next generation of product development. But again, that was the one provider mentioned in the contender category. And with this, I want to hand back over to Alex to talk about some of the work they're doing with one of their key customers.
Thank you, Charles. I'd like to spend next 5 minutes really briefly showcasing how all of this plays out in the real world. And I'd like to talk about Canadian Tire, which is a company that many people are familiar with, but not everyone knows about it. This is one of the most trusted Canadian brands. This is a company that's at over $10 million in revenue, and this is the company that encompasses businesses from retail to financial services to gasoline stations. Many of their brands are very well known. Canadian Tire is one of the largest retailers for general merchandise. Marks focuses on men's apparel. FGL is #1 sports retailer. So this is a group of companies that encompasses a wide range of interaction with customers. And a couple of fun facts about the company is the fact that over 90% of Canada population lives within 15 minutes of Canadian Tire store, and more than 80% of the population shop at the Canadian store every year. And what has happened is that Canadian Tire over the years struggled to adopt digital, and several years ago they set on a transformation exercise where they brought on new leadership, they brought on new CTO that comes from software industry, and he helped them articulate technology vision where they changed the shopping experience into an entertaining experience, what Eugene calls a shoppertainment, and what he calls the future of retail. And with this vision, they see how they can leverage their brand and the legacy of their heritage of interacting with customers and create a new innovative experiences. And over the last 10 months, last year, we helped them create a foundation for the new commerce, and for the Christmas shopping season deliver a new website where previously customers were not able to buy goods online in most categories. Now they were able to do that. So this is an example of a retailer going through transformation and embracing digital and becoming more technology aware company. And why have they partnered with EPAM? This was an unusual choice for them, because when we set out with our vision 20 years ago, EPAM was not really a famous company. Eastern Europe, where most of our engineers are, was not a famous destination for IT services, and so only the companies that were already mature in this way and were looking for something special, companies like SAP and Oracle, they were willing to take a bet on EPAM. And we started with product engineering. We still very much focused on that. We have over 80 high-tech and software companies on our list, which helps us bring into our company experience of dealing with emerging technologies, technologies that are not yet well understood in the marketplace, ability to deal with leading platforms, and we have also invested a lot into tools and platforms to support product development. Then with the changes that we're talking about over the last 10 years, companies in other industries, companies like Expedia emerged, online travel agents, companies like Google disrupting advertising marketplace. And with the advent of social, mobile, analytics, and cloud, EPAM has started to focus on providing business solutions. And then eventually today, where we're starting to see how digital transformation is playing out and what are the key success factors behind it. We work with key industries that you've seen before, industries that find themselves amidst the disruption: banking and finance, commerce and travel, media, and software and high tech. And I work with leading organizations in those industries to help them create new innovative products. And to make the point more blunt is where companies look for new partners and they're trying to close the gap in the customer experience and close the gap in the internal skills, they really have several choices to go. And what's happening in the marketplace is that many of the traditional system integrators, companies that are very adept at execution of technology, they don't necessarily have the right mix of skills. A lot of them are very adept at the operational level, dealing with the very large-scale systems. Some of them are very adept at transformation, taking the company from where it is to where they know they want to be. But not a lot of them are familiar with taking the company from where it is to where they don't even know where they want to be, helping them innovate, build new products, and bring them to the market. And those are the requirements for the new generation of companies, what on this slide is called Software-Enriches-The-Brand companies. So with this, I'd like to wrap up and pass it back to Charles for some of the key takeaway points that we would like to stress once again.
Okay, thank you, Alex. And it's clear that there are, as we've seen in the presentation so far, that there are some key steps which companies need to take to emerge as leaders in the software-enriches-the-brand world. But firstly, it's that maturing the portfolio of internal skills. They need to develop, for example, product management expertise in-house. They need to grow key skills, user experience, for example. In many cases, the companies simply just haven't had that level, those types of skills in-house in the past. It hasn't been considered as important as it actually is now. Is a need to embrace and also develop the governance of agile engagements. I think clearly most companies now understand agile. They understand the benefits. They've seen the benefits of agile. But in many cases now it's about how do you develop the governance of that. How do you scale agile, not just internally, but also how do you then work in an agile approach with an outsourced provider, for example. And finally, that it's necessary also to integrate the CMO, the CIO, the business roles, that many of these roles are starting to blur more and more as we see these software-enabled products. Secondly, where appropriately, it's necessary to engage with partners to close this engagement gap. In not every instance is it appropriate to look to a third-party provider, but in some cases, as we've seen, that there are a set of skills which are in demand, which are difficult to find and to acquire, and in those cases, it may be appropriate to engage those partners to find those particular skills which you don't have in-house. And that's particularly the case for many companies which arguably are analog type companies. They don't have that technology expertise in-house. So it's necessary then to get that expertise. It's necessary to look to third parties, look to more open innovation models to gain these new skills. So it's also necessary then to look for partners with key capabilities. Consider alternative niche vendors in the innovation and transformation space. And look for specific industry knowledge and capabilities, and even segment expertise as well. It's also necessary to go beyond, social mobility, analytics, cloud, but look at what are some of the investments that some of these providers are making in their next generation of technologies. For example, go and visit their labs, for example. What investments are companies making, for example, in artificial intelligence? What about high-performance computing? There's such this huge array of potential technologies at the moment that you can look to engage partners, particularly what they're doing in these next-generation type engagements. And finally, it's necessary to develop the governance programs to manage this broader ecosystem of partners. I mentioned in many cases, particularly for product development, which has traditionally been seen as very core to companies, there's been a certain level of reluctance, almost a not invented here syndrome for many companies, that they're unwilling to work with third parties for product development. But we see this changing. But as it changes, it's necessary also to develop the governance programs to make sure that these engagements are successful. So, for example, it's necessary to mature your vendor management processes to look just beyond just efficiencies and technical focus. As we saw earlier, cost is no longer the #1 reason to look to partners in many of these areas. It's about trying to find the capabilities and the skills. And finally, let's say to integrate the CMO and CIO sourcing, this agency versus system integrator type debate, particularly with this move to looking to engage more digital agencies, for example. and to enable these next generation of engagements. And with that, I will hand back over to Alex to handle the question and answer session.
Yeah. Thank you, Charles. I think the first question that we have is probably better for you to answer, and the question is about Cognizant or Accenture. You know, have they participated in the research?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So clearly, the providers which participated in this evaluation were those providers which met that criteria which I put up on that earlier slide. So that more than $100 million in software product development services revenues, having a particular focus, and then it's also considered a strategic service line for these companies. And while Accenture has made some interesting moves in the more engineering services part of the market in recent months, it has not really been, software product development has not really been a core focus area for companies such as Accenture and Cognizant, and to the best of my knowledge, they did not meet the criteria to participate in this evaluation.
All right, so the next question is with regards to the slide 7 and the examples of where the constituents were able to figure out the app in less than 1 minute. What are the examples of average or worst case scenarios? What happens when a user cannot figure out an app and needs to turn to customer support for help and documentation? So I'll try to take a stab at that question. I think the very nature of importance of customer experience is kind of contained in this question. Many of the products that we see today in the marketplace are out-competing the legacy products specifically because their applications are easier to use. For example, Box.com, you know, their long-term vision is, at the end of the day, not very different from, let's say, EMC's Documentum on Demand vision. This is a content collaboration and automation of how content is consumed and produced within the organization. But the reason why they have tens of millions of users is because their product is so very, very easy to understand and use. So in a way, this is the customer experience is becoming a benchmark of what products needs to be. And the solutions for why products cannot, users cannot understand some of the products also different. There is obviously traditional customer support and the help documentation model, but there is also crowdsourcing where many of the applications now turn to the users, communities like Get Satisfaction, where users support each other and actually help companies determine what is the best user experience. So there is a combination of kind of more traditional solution to this problem and also some of the new approaches.
And just to add to that, I would say, certainly, I think that question gets to the very heart of this, of the nature of the concept of software enriches the brand. That if you develop a mobile app, for example, which does not meet your customer expectations, and it gets slammed, for example, in whichever app store it is in, then it has a direct, immediate negative impact on your brand, because that's how customers are now engaging with companies. It's via, or in many cases, through the mobile app or via the website. And if that's not meeting their expectations, if it's not easy to use, if it does not create a delightful, fun, addictive customer experience, then it's going to be has an immediate negative impact on your brand and on your company.
Thank you, Charles. There is one more question about Canadian Tire use case specifically. What technologies Canadian Tire is leveraging to invest or improve digital user experience? This is a very nuanced question in reality, because some of the technologies are more traditional digital marketing solutions or e-commerce platforms. But what is important here is how deep is the impact of the customer experience in the organization. Because Canadian Tire uses a franchise dealer model where many of the stores are independently operated and have their own flexibility in pricing. And so digital user experience for them spans not just digital marketing or e-commerce or mobile, but also goes back to the back office systems of record, ERP systems used to fulfill, systems used to source products. So this transformation case study that we talked about actually included everything from ERP on all the way to the digital experience of kiosks in store. And then there is a question, maybe Charles, you're best equipped to handle this since you do a lot of quantitative research. Is there any data on the intersection between excellent experience and what customers are willing to pay for this type of software or experience?
So what was the question?
The question is there a data on the intersection between UX and what customers are willing to pay for this type? So
I don't have that data to hand, to be honest. I don't believe we have a study specifically looking at that. I mean, clearly, what we do see more anecdotally in the survey results is that it's rising in importance. You see there are different stakeholders coming to the fore, that it's now a critical business priority. It's no longer just for IT or for technology stakeholders, but you really see it becoming a business priority, and that becomes also then brings in more there's a greater willingness to invest in these particular areas, and you see that when we talk about the key investment areas going forward. We see that clearly being a key priority for organizations. I don't have specific data on the actual amount.
It also might be important to consider that for some companies this is not about the ability to charge premium, but is more of their ability to not cannibalize their existing offering. So in a way, the investments that companies are making in UX are sometimes defensive moves to protect their existing revenues from being cannibalized by other companies. So they're kind of disrupting themselves. There are many examples of that throughout different industries. And so the investments that companies are making, Walmarts and automotive companies opening offices in Silicon Valley to try to source the right talent to be able to do that in a way are not just about pricing or their ability to kind of harvest this surplus created by user experience, but also about ability to grow their businesses long term. So with that, I think we don't have any more questions. So I'd like to thank everyone for participating very much. Thank you, Charles, for joining us today. And the replay of this webinar is going to be available on epam.vm. So if you'd like to share it with your colleagues, you'll be able to do so. Thank you very much for participating on EPAM.